Hey everyone, this is Yuri Rashkin, and you're watching a video on analyzing the audience. Is it important? You bet it is important, because if we have a speech, no matter what it is, and we're presenting it to a group of kindergartners, or if we present it to a group of engineers, or if we're speaking to a group of teachers, or if we're speaking to a group of retirees, chances are really good that we would want to change our speech, not a lot, but to adjust it to the audience that we're speaking to. And sometimes we may even want to pick a different topic altogether if we can't reframe the speech appropriately for the audience that is looking for us to deliver the information. So let's take a look at this. First of all, audience centeredness makes speaking easier. What does this mean? It's a really cool concept, which means that if we are centered on doing the right thing that we have to do right at this moment, and we're only thinking about ourselves, it's going to be very stressful and very challenging, and perhaps even more so than it needs to be and than it can be if we just focus our attention not on ourselves, but on our audience. And we think about what is the information that our audience needs to hear at this moment. How can we help our audience fill in the gap in their knowledge with our presentation? So if we think about it this way, it gets easier. If you're a waiter and you have to think about doing your job and making sure that you mentioned all the specials and that you did this and this, it's very tiring. And it's exhausting. And it's exhausting no matter what. But if instead we think about, what do my customers need right now? What does my table need? Are they happy? Do they need? What do they need? You get them that, and you are in better shape. So thinking about the audience and centering your attention on the audience is going to make your life, frankly, a little bit easier. So we want to ask ourselves, to whom am I speaking? Am I speaking to a group of professionals, or am I speaking to a group of amateurs or people who are passionate about something, people who don't know anything about my topic? Who am I speaking to? And what do I want my audience to know, believe, or do as a result of my speech? And of course, know that would be more of an informative speech, and then believe and do, well, that we could be looking at a persuasive speech there. And what is the most effective way of composing and presenting my speech to accomplish that aim and that goal? So what is the most effective way to present the information? If you're speaking to people that are younger, perhaps having more visuals would be appropriate than if we're speaking to an older audience, in which case having fast-moving images may be distracting. Or if we're speaking to a group of professionals, we want to have more terms that are appropriate for the industry that we're a part of and whose representatives are our audience members. Or maybe we need to do something entirely different, and maybe if we're speaking to our audience of visually impaired persons, our PowerPoints don't matter quite so much. The psychology of audiences. This is another way to help ourselves, and that is to remember that people are egocentric, and that means that we think about ourselves first. In fact, this means that nobody likes us as much as we like ourselves. We think that others people, like us and love us. They may, hopefully, a lot of them feel very strongly in a positive way about us. However, nobody likes us as much as we do, and that means that we pay closest attention to messages that affect our own values and our own beliefs and our own well-being. Therefore, if I'm giving a speech to a group of college students and I say, this school should be charging more for tuition, this is too cheap for the quality of education that you're receiving here, this may not be a speech that is accepted well by the audience of college students because it affects negatively their well-being. And this is so important. is this information relevant to me? This is why it is important to think of the concept of the big umbrella. How does this topic that you want to talk about fits into the range of interests of your audience? If you remember when we were speaking about in the first day of class about the syllabus, and I spoke about the expectations that students have of the instructor and that instructor has of students. So many students mention the idea that they want material taught in class to be relevant to them. They want this material to be something they can use. And that really is an expectation that we have for every speech and every presentation. We want to get something out of it, and therefore it is the job of the speaker to explain how this material is relevant. If you are speaking about technology, then maybe you want to talk about ease of life and all the exciting things that can occur and how this technology can help you, I don't know, do your work without leaving house, and now you don't have to sit in car for 3 hours, 6 hours, how many hours you had to sit in the car before, now you don't. Do you feel that this is information relevant to you if it can save you this much time? Yes. Okay, so let's talk about this. So we want to think about our audience and think about the big range of interest that our topic fits into. And finally, we want to get inside their experience. That means looking to connect with our audience. We want our audience to relax and to feel at ease. One of the ways to do that is to show them that we are basically one of them, and that means making a remark or acknowledging something that is affecting everybody. This is why rock musicians will go, "Hello, Cleveland," because the audience knows, aha, they know exactly where they are, and they are here, and we are here right now. Perfect. We are together in this. Therefore, they get inside our experience. This is where if you're in sales and you go into a presentation and you come in and somebody has Green Bay Packers stuff plastered all over their office walls, you would be wise for this audience to mention Green Bay Packers, talk perhaps about their last game, how they did this season, and so on. Get inside their experience. At the very least, we can make some kind of a remark about, hey, what a nice day to wear a mask, because that's kind of our life these days, wearing masks. So mention it, and therefore we are connecting with our audience. There is a somewhat philosophical question being raised here. Are your classmates a real audience? Do they matter? Are they real people with real feelings and emotions? Because when you think about it, I am the one who gives the grade. So do you, as students, really matter? Here's my answer. Yes, they do. Yes, you do. Because my approach to a real audience is an audience that makes a speaker nervous. If you're speaking to a group of 5-year-olds and they make you nervous, they are a real audience. If you're speaking to a circle of stuffed animals and they do not make you nervous, they're not a real audience. When we look at our audience, we can take them apart through demographic analysis. And that allows us to figure out who are these people in front of us by identifying the general demographic features of our audience. And then we can gauge the importance of those features to a particular speaking situation. So, for instance, if I'm going to explain how to make a great burger to a group of Catholics, does it really matter that they're all Catholics? No, it doesn't matter, because there's no problem. Burger is a burger, right? However, if I'm giving a presentation on how to make the best burger to a group of vegetarians, then that particular aspect, the demographic aspect, could be very relevant to this speech, and I have to take that into consideration. There's other groups where speaking about burgers may be inappropriate, but just keep in mind that some things don't matter for this particular audience and other things may do. In fact, if you think about it, for any audience, you can find some topic that would be inappropriate for them just as a matter of exercise. Think about your audience. Now, how do we take our audience apart through this demographic analysis? Well, this is how. We take a look at the audience's age, and if you're speaking to a classroom at a university, chances are there's a lot of similarity in your audience members. It may seem that you're all different and unique, and you are, but also in some way you have a lot in common, such as perhaps your age. After all, most students in colleges are going to be, well, I would say their early 20s. So, okay, so if you're speaking in a classroom, you know that you're speaking to a group of younger people up to maybe 22, 25 years of age. What is interesting to them? How can you make the topic is interesting to them? And if you are a college student as well, that's an advantage, isn't it? Because you have a better idea of what may be interesting to college students than somebody in a nursing home. Maybe, maybe not. And next is you want to think about gender. What is the gender makeup of your audience? And if you see, for instance, that your audience is primarily made up of people who are self-identifying or likely to as male, then you may not want to give a speech, that speech, about how to apply makeup, because maybe for the perfect audience, that is the perfect speech. But for an audience where you have most people who usually, I would say, do not apply makeup, and definitely not on a daily basis, having understanding and paying attention to the importance of a proper makeup application may be lost on that particular audience. Next, religion. You may be speaking to people of different religions, and you want to take that into some kind of consideration, in a sense that, if nothing else, try not to offend the audience unless that is your specific purpose. And sexual orientation. What is the sexual orientation of your audience? And more importantly, does it matter? If it doesn't matter, I wouldn't think much about it. But if it does matter, then you may want to take that into consideration. In fact, you may even want to check with others to make sure that you're not missing anything. Sometimes we're just not the best guides of how not to be offensive. Next, racial, ethnic, and cultural background. People come from all sorts of backgrounds, and this is where we need to remember to go back to that ethnocentrism that we spoke about in a lecture past, where people will look at other culture from their own point of view. And others can look at us from their point of view, and that may not be a winning position for us. So we have to think about what is the racial makeup of our audience, what is the ethnic and cultural background of our audience. Well, for instance, if you're speaking to a group of mostly African Americans and you speak about police, you're going to have a certain kind of reception that's likely to be different if you're going to speak to a group of Caucasian or white listeners, audience members, about police action as well. You may not even have to change anything in your speech simply to get a different reaction. So you may want to change something in your speech to get the reaction that you want and that you're looking to get. Finally, group membership. Group membership is fantastic because that can override a lot of other things. So, for instance, you could be male, you could be women, you could be young, you could be old, you could be Christian, you could be Jewish, you could be Muslim, you could be of all sexual orientations, of all cultural, ethnic, and racial backgrounds, but we're all students or members of the school alumni association, or we're all members of the student body. And that brings us together. Or maybe we can say, well, because we know that group membership can have such positive impact on a speech, we can say we're all Americans here, which of course isn't technically true because some of us may not be Americans, but most of us are Americans here. And therefore, all of a sudden, we're all in the same group. Situational audience analysis. How do we take apart the situation where we find ourselves? Well, let's think about this. Are you going to be speaking to a large room where you may need to have bigger gestures, louder voice, or are you speaking to a smaller group, smaller setting where you need to do less projecting and less body language and more intimate setting? Or maybe you're going to be speaking on the radio altogether where it doesn't even matter how you're dressed. adjust. So size and physical setting can affect a presentation, so that's part of audience analysis. I know, for instance, that if I'm playing piano for silent films and my audience is sitting far apart, they're not going to find the speech, or I'm sorry, they're not going to find the silent movie with hilarious Charlie Chaplin or Buster Keaton to be quite as hilarious as if when they sit close to each other. Because if the audience members are sitting closer to each other, for some reason things get funnier. So that's something to consider as we are thinking about what is the physical and size setting of our space where we're going to be presenting. Next, we need to consider that audiences have a disposition toward the topic. The audience may have interest toward the topic, or the audience may have no interest toward the topic, in which case it hardly matters what we say. If I'm going to explain to a group of college students about how to apply to get to a good college, it may be a little, I'm not going to say late for that, but it's not really relevant because they're already in school and chances are they're going to stay in school, right? However, if I'm speaking to a group of high schoolers about how to get into good college, their interest level in this topic may be substantially higher. Similarly, the audience may have a lot of knowledge about the topic, or audience may have no knowledge about the topic, or audience may have some knowledge about the topic. We will talk in a second about how to determine their level of knowledge, but we need to consider the possibility that they may know somewhere between nothing and a lot more than we do about the topic. How are we going to deal with that? And finally, what is their attitude towards this topic? Are they interested? Do they have a positive attitude, or do they have a negative attitude? If I'm going to be giving you a speech about how school should be more expensive, you're probably going to have a negative attitude. That's not going to help me, even though I have this wonderful presentation to present. Disposition toward the speaker. Imagine that there is a person that you absolutely hate, that you just can't stand this person. And this person is going to walk into our classroom and give a speech on the best chocolate chip cookies you've ever had in your life. Do you like chocolate chip cookies? Chances are you do. Chocolate chip cookies are great and popular. Most people like them a lot. So chances are the topic is interesting. But if we are not interested in this person at all, if the sight of this person makes us want to leave the room, then no matter how good these chocolate chip cookies are, we are just not interested. On the other hand, if we have a person come into this space that we love, adore, and want to be like when we grow up, and this person explains that he's going to teach us how to properly wash dishes, and we're like, oh, I really don't like washing dishes, but I really like the speaker. All right, I'm going to listen and pay attention, even though I don't care about the topic at all, but oh boy, I really love the speaker. And what is the disposition toward the occasion? Where are we speaking, ladies and gentlemen? Are we speaking at a birthday? Are we speaking at a wedding? Are we speaking at a funeral? Are we speaking at a retirement party? All of those things matter to some extent, and we need to take them into consideration. One of my favorite stories on this one is about old politician who used to be Speaker of the House, Tip O'Neill. And Tip O'Neill was congressman in Massachusetts, in Boston. And one day he was supposed to give a speech to a group of Irish men in the community. And he prepared all sorts of jokes that he was going to crack, and it was going to be a good old time. And then he found out, right before he was going to give his speech, that his speech will be before lunch, which means that his audience is hungry, thirsty, and probably sober. And that means that he had to totally change his speech, and he went from something that was very funny to something that was very serious and very somber. Now, I'm not saying that you should be able to toss one speech out and quickly come up with another one. This has a lot to do with reframing the speech and just thinking about how can we adjust the topic for either the requirements of the assignment or the presentation or our audience. How can we get information about our audience? Well, we have several choices. First of all, we can do an immediate show of hands, which means asking an audience a yes or no question. Now, we can ask an open-ended question. Those are dangerous. And if you're giving a presentation in my class, I actively discourage you from asking any question that has anything but a yes or no answer, for a simple reason that your time is being judged and your presentation needs to take a certain amount of time. It is really not to your advantage to open up the floor for questions, because at that point your time is no longer yours. It belongs really to everybody, because you can say, hey, raise your hand if you've traveled to other states. People know, yes, they've traveled to other states. No, they didn't travel to other states. Simple yes, no. Or you can ask people, raise your hand, or how many states have you been to? And then some people are going to say 2. Some people are going to say 5. Some people are going to say, let me think about this. And all of a sudden, the time limits that you have, and this may not be just a class setting. This can be somewhere else where you have to give a timed presentation. Now this time is moving at a pace that you're not controlling. In fact, this whole speech, you just lost control over it. So once again, I recommend speeches that have a yes or no answer. It can be very useful. One important asterisk here: be prepared for whatever the answer is, and act exactly like this is the answer that you expected. Raise your hand if you saw this movie. Oh, nobody. Great. Raise your hand if you saw this movie. Oh, everybody. Great. And you continue, because you are not asking the question to conduct a scientific study so much as you are asking a question to generate attention from your audience, which means this is a very, very shallow way of learning about your audience, but it can be useful nonetheless. Next way to learn more about the audience, and that's I think a much better way, that's a short term, ask a question. If you begin your presentation by asking people in the audience to explain maybe what brought them there or why they're there, if the audience size is limited to something that makes sense for your presentation, and especially if you were asked to give a longer presentation than you feel comfortable speaking, ask your audience a question, an open-ended question, and then have each one of them answer it. There doesn't have to be a wrong answer. Hey kids, 2 + 2 = 4, 4, 5. Are you wrong? No, we're talking about, please tell me about what brought you to this lecture presentation, and people will explain. This is very good on several levels. From the audience's point of view, it allows them to make sure that their concerns are heard, because chances are, if they came to your presentation, they're interested in something specific which you may not know, because you can't read minds. You don't know if this person is sitting here because she likes this topic, because she hates this topic, because she knows nothing about this topic, or because she knows more than you about this topic. So ask people, they will share their thoughts and they will feel better. In the meantime, you as the speaker will also feel better, because you're going to use that time to just kind of calm down your nerves, because here you are kind of technically presenting, but it's not really you who is doing most of the speaking. So you can conduct and control the conversation, make everybody feel good, settle in, and then you begin really your presentation knowing much better about where your audience is coming from. Finally here, long-term, conduct a survey. This is a really good idea if somebody's asking you to come and speak to a group in advance and you have time, and raise your hand if you ever heard of SurveyMonkey. SurveyMonkey is something that you should very well know about, because it is free, it's good, it's convenient. It is an app that allows you to design your own survey, and up to 10 questions, last time I checked, it is free, which means that if somebody's asking you to give a presentation and you have time, you can say, if I send you a survey of just a few questions gauging the level of interest and knowledge that your audience has about my topic, could you share the link with your members? The person goes, sure. And now you are sending questions to your audience, your future audience, and you're learning about them before you even come in and say a word. Once again, you will become more prepared, right? Now, there are three types of questions that can be asked in a survey. First, it is fixed alternative questions. Is it A, B, C, or D? Pick one. B would be scale questions. This would be on a scale of 1 to 5, 1 to 10. You pick the scale. It is also sometimes known as Likert scale, after the name of the person who created this idea. So we have a scale. Finally, C, open-ended questions. This would be questions that allow respondents to answer however they want. Open-ended questions are a really good idea because they allow you to make sure that you are asking the right questions in the first place, because maybe all of your pre-designed, predetermined questions are totally missing the mark and you're not getting the information that you're going to need. And that's why, like I said, every good survey will have at least one open-ended question, and there's somewhere to make sure that they're not missing the boat and they're not missing the elephant in the room, and you insert the metaphor that you want. But doing a survey in advance can be a very good way to help you make sure that you prepare your speech appropriately for your audience. Adapting to the audience. We can adapt to our audience before the speech, and we can adapt to our audience during the speech. Before the speech, we can assess how our audience is likely to respond to what we say in a speech. This is where I was saying you're asking your audience a question to raise your hand, and then no matter what they say, you are prepared because you're not dependent on their answer for your presentation. And think about this in a more wider scope. Let's say you're going to make your presentation to people, and let's say you know your audience is going to be whoever they are, retirees, engineers, teachers, kindergartners. How are they likely to respond? Think about that for a second and think about if you need to adjust anything. If you have experience presenting to this group, chances are you will have a better understanding of what and how they might react, which means you may want to take that information into consideration when you are designing your speech in the first place. And then you want to adjust to make sure that what we say is as clear, appropriate, whether it means terminology that you need to have, technical terminology, or taking terminology out. And you want to be as convincing as possible because, after all, you have just spent time presenting to people. You should have something to show for that time, right? How about convincing people? And then we can adapt to our audience during the speech. Adapting to our audience during the speech has a lot to do with eye contact. Because if we are not looking at the audience and we're saying, adapting to the audience is very important. Oh, look, everybody is looking at something else, because if our audience is not seeing our eye contact, there's a very good chance that they're going to disengage. We know this. But if we are not looking at our audience, we may never know what happened and when we lost them. There was a conversation that I've had with one of professors that wrote a textbook that we were using in a class back when I was in master's program years ago. And we asked this professor, how does he feel about students using cell phones in class? And he said this is his approach. If there's one person using the cell phone, then, well, perhaps they have something going on and they need to attend to a crisis in their life. However, if everyone is on their phones, that means that you, as the instructor, lost the room and you need to do something to get it back. Without eye contact, without looking out into our audience, it's very hard to do anything, right? Because we don't know if something needs to be done. And of course, if we know we lost the audience, first thing we can do is stop speaking, as that has an amazing effect of gathering people's attention. But perhaps there are other things we need to do. Perhaps this is a good time to tell a story or ask a question. Hey, by show of hands, raise your hand if you've ever been asked a question. Oh, I see hands. Great. Moving on. And that's about it. Thanks for watching. This was Yuri Rashkin.